Martin Luther King Jr., one of the world's most famous civil rights activists, and for good reason. This guy's kind of awesome. Hello everybody and welcome to History Abridged. It's history, just shorter. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th, 1929. At birth, he was given the name Mike King, but he and his father, who was also a civil rights activist, were inspired by the German professor of theology Martin Luther, and thus named themselves after him. Being black in America, King came across a lot of racism during his time. One of the first times was when he was a child. He made a friend who happened to be white. They went to different schools, but they played together anyway. Unfortunately, that kid's dad was a jerk and forbade their friendship. King was a devout Christian, but surprisingly, he was quite skeptical of the Bible when he was a child. He even spoke out against it in Sunday school. Eventually, he came to a realization, and I quote, "The Bible has many profound truths which one cannot escape." The skills King used in his activism were actually cultivated at an early age. In high school, he was on the debate team as well as part of the drama club. He was also the little smarty pants. He skipped both the 9th and the 12th grade, so obviously the cool kid in school. During his junior year, King participated in and won an oratorical contest held by a college. On his way back, he once again experienced racism when he was forced to give up a seat and stand so a white person could sit. At 15, King started college and eventually graduated with a bachelor in sociology. After that, he joined the seminary and eventually graduated from there with a bachelor in divinity. Eventually, King wrote his dissertation and officially became Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's a bit of a mouthful, but a really cool sounding mouthful. King's first real protest was the Montgomery bus boycott. After Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat for a white woman, King and another activist by the name of E.D. Nixon seized the opportunity and began a protest. They encouraged all black Americans to boycott the bus system. The protest lasted more than a year, in which time King's house was actually bombed. Luckily, King wasn't home at the time, and none of his family was hurt. Regardless, people were angry, so a mob of about 300 people showed up at his house looking for blood. King simply walked outside and calmed them by raising his hands and telling them that they needed to love their white brothers and sisters, even if they didn't love them back. The end of the boycott brought about a better result than King and Nixon had hoped for. Legal segregation on buses was outlawed. This protest turned King into a public figure and the best-known spokesman for the civil rights movement. Following were a whole bunch of protests as well as arrests. All of these protests eventually led to the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, the demands of which were end segregation in schools, laws prohibiting discrimination in employment, protection of civil rights workers from police brutality, a $2 an hour minimum wage for all workers, and self-government for Washington, D.C. 250,000 people of diverse ethnicities attended the protest. This was the largest gathering of protesters in D.C. of all time. This is also where King gave his famous "I Have a Dream" speech, which, fun fact, he didn't plan. King had a whole other speech prepared when someone shouted, "Tell them about the dream, Martin!" And of course, he did, which resulted in one of the most famous speeches in American history. Next came the Selma voting rights movement, which was a little bit messier than the other protests. The first march that King did not attend because of church duties ended in police and mob violence, a day known as Bloody Sunday. King later expressed that if he had known this was going to happen, he would have forsaken his church duties to be there. There was a second march, and King did lead it, but technically the march was illegal, so they made it a short one. They marched a short distance, had a prayer session, and then went home. Finally, the march went full out and ended at the state capitol. This is where King gave his "How long, not long" speech. King's final protest was the Poor People's Campaign, which addressed issues of economic injustice. King led a multiracial army to Washington to demand basic guaranteed income. It was at this protest that King was assassinated. Following his death, people rioted all across the country. I think those people might have missed the point of a lot of his teachings. Martin Luther King Jr., an incredible man and an outstanding activist. While most of us are just typing angry Facebook posts and YouTube comments, he was out there marching for equality. What a boss. And that was the history of Martin Luther King Jr. Abridged. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit the like button. If you think I left anything out, please leave it in the comments, or if you have an idea for a future episode, again, please leave it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to get notifications about when I put up new videos. Hit that little bell right next to the subscribe button. And as always, this is History Abridged.